For whatever reason, when it comes to on-course play, during playing lessons, whether I'm playing with members of the club or friends, something tends to happen that doesn't always seem to happen in practice. And this move or intention, I don't really know where it comes from or why it happens, but it's stemming from a tentativeness, an anxiety, if you will, and trying so hard to move this golf club and being so conscious of your hand connected to it that we end up using way too much wrist during the swing. And what that does is create instability, consistency, and it alters our speed and actually our entire golf swing sequence. So you might be really struggling with consistency and you're looking in all the wrong places when in actual fact stems from your wrists and how you're using them during the swing. And I wager it's way more easy than you think. One of the oldest lessons around and one of the beginner golf lessons is to try and match the L shape. So I'm forming like a L here, if you will. Left arm is parallel, my arms are parallel, and the club is pointing up to the sky, club pointing somewhat towards the ball. On the through swing, we want to pretty much replicate that, arms parallel, pointing down. Just go on YouTube, you'll see hundreds, perhaps even thousands of tips talking about it. Now, I'm not here to say that that in itself is a bad thing, but golf is like a balancing act. It's a tightrope. More often than not, we start going too far in one direction. So it's like you're trying to hinge the wrist correctly, point that club at the ball. What tends to happen 99% of the time is the wrists hinge way too much, especially because we're anxious. The wrists go way too much, too early, too soon, cramped. The body hasn't really moved or wound up in any shape or form. Then the arms are having to really do everything. So the arms are having to work so much harder to swing through that ball to try and not just deliver speed, but to try and square that club face up in a very short amount of time and space. This leads to dozens of bad shots. Shots that you don't know where they're going to go. Shots where you're like, oh, I'm thinning it, I'm chunking it, whatever. Basically, it's crap. So we need to really oversimplify it, to dial it back. And I want you to test this out. It's not going to be the be-all and end-all answer. It's not necessarily to say that you do not need wrist hinge. What I'm saying to you is you do not need as much wrist hinge as you think you do. And that intention alone can transform your entire swing, because what you're going to do is focus more on what the body is doing, using the larger muscles, this intention to generate your golf swing, okay? Using the ground better. You got good shoes, this is the feet that we need to use. The power isn't going to come from here. Stability of the club face, yes, it comes from the wrist somewhat, but we can have a lot more neutrality when we don't use them quite as much through the swing. We often get in a bit of a pickle when we're thinking about wrist hinge, because again, you go online or you speak to your friends, there's all talk of creating this kind of extension, right? A bit more like a Morikawa or something like this, a stronger intention. So you take it back, the palm is down, you're taking it back this way. Lots of talk about that there, to apply the pressure down. Doesn't work for the vast majority of you. I'm not going to bore you why, I just want you to try what I'm talking about. Because all the wrists do, okay? All the wrists during the golf swing are going to rotate this way, okay? We're just rotating that way. That's all they do as far as movement, rotation, and it's happening in the forearms. The other movement happens is wrist hinge this way, just up and down, okay? That's ulnar movement here. We want very minimal extension or flexion and extension this way. We want that to be as minimal as possible. It's basically just up and down and around and around. This is what's going to give us the most stability on every single golf shot. Not this, because that creates that flippy, flappy motion. And I'm not tailing you off. This is something that I have been struggling with a lot more in the past until I've really simplified my action. And you can too. With that said, I want you to do two things. The first is actually more about setup. I want you to pay a lot more attention to where your arms and your wrists and hands are allowing themselves to be at setup. Are you, and this is where you got to do your own homework, are you already manipulating them into a position? Are you feeling like you've got to move them forward? Are you feeling you've got to move them back? Are you fidgeting and moving around feeling uncomfortable? I want you to focus more on getting yourself into a setup alignment, okay, with the hips, with the upper body, and test around about where your body moves the arms. All I'm letting do here is letting my arms just hang. If I move my pelvis that way, the hands sort of come back and I'm more here, right? So then I might do that, but you're pushing the hands forward, it's because of this. Likewise, if I'm too far forward here, my hands are going to basically be moved too far this way, so then I'll move them back and I've got too much extension, and that you could call it the hands are behind the ball a little bit too much. Again, all of this leads to the necessity for more manipulation during the swing. We want the minimum amount of manipulation during the golf swing. That is a tenet you must have. The more we can do at setup that requires less manipulation in the split second of a golf swing, I guarantee you will be more consistent. You will enjoy golf more because you're not trying to adjust and compensate through that split second. So pay more attention to your setup. And I want you to work on this in a mirror if you need to, but really it's more about what you see and feel, okay? And you think, well, how does this got to do with the wrist? As I just showed you, basically, if we get in a correct, more neutral setup, as we swing back, we don't need to actively do as much to create the leverage that we need. If we move the body, the arms will gradually add a wrist hinge. They will gradually do it without you having to try to do it. So when I say don't hinge the wrists, that's really what I mean. It's don't intend to hinge the wrists. And now we're working on a body movement and feeling like we're just allowing those arms and wrists and club head, the gravity of the club head, to work its way down and around without having to force it. So the difference will be quite noticeable. And the way I want you to really practice this, at first, get the setup right, so your hips are a little bit further forward, your arms are hanging naturally, and the club sits there into what would be a good neutral setup. And as we make a backswing, I want you to not use the wrists. So show me and practice some swings where you're not doing anything back here and you're not doing anything here, trying to let the club beat you. So let's focus on the backswing first, okay? I'm just gonna make sure that I wind my body, I rotate my legs, I wind up my core, and my arms are just going to follow. Bonus tip, one of my secret magic golf tips that are so simple, that's helped literally tens of thousands of golfers, is the sensation of heavy arms. That alone will relieve you of the forced intention of hinging the wrist so much and being too tense. Feeling more tense and supported in your setup with your legs, your core, your shoulders, but my arms are feeling heavy. That's the only intention and thought I want you to have. What does that mean? Yes, that means that the club feels heavy, but if your arms are heavier, they just follow your body movement. It's much more repeatable to move your body and let those arms flow around you than it is to try and do something specific with the arms and the wrists. So just have that in your mind. Heavy arms, and see what it does. It will give you plenty of wrist movement, more than enough, but you won't have to try and force it. For the backswing, we're going to work on that setup. I'm going to feel like I've got heavy arms, and now I'm just going to try and rotate with no wrist hinge and see where that puts my club. I'm only thinking about the backswing for now, but I'm going to hit a shot. I mean, that was so easy and simple and repeatable. I was more focused on my movement rather than the minutiae. Here's what I want you to do on the impact and downswing. Now you might be thinking, well, I'm not going to be able to generate much speed if I'm not using my wrists. Yes, and really no. With the same intention of heavy arms, I want you to focus more on propulsion that is coming from your core here, more from the main body. Just like if you were to throw it, you wouldn't just throw a ball like that, would you? You wouldn't just flip the wrists, you would let the whole body basically pull the arms through that way. I wouldn't be worrying about whipping the wrists or anything. So with that in mind, that simple idea of letting the arms follow the body and generating the movement. I'm not trying to swing hard here, I'm just trying to do things slowly to show you. So same again, so minimal wrist hinge on the backswing. Now notice, I'm not rigid, I'm just letting them go where they want, but I'm maintaining my wrist condition. But here's the thing, as I come down, I really want to try and make sure that my hands are beating the club head to the ball. I'm not letting that club head win the race ahead of me at any point. I'm swinging the handle of the club with my body to be more passive this way. The wrist will still release just fine, but I'm not trying to, and I don't want you to try to. That's the point. So less wrist hinge going back, heavy arms. There. Now, on a bigger shot, those wrists would have released a little bit more and I would have had a fuller finish, but I was trying to emphasize it for you. But that contact was sweet, very simple, very reliable. And that's it. Put those ideas, concepts into action. Test it out with pitching, chipping, drives, irons. I assure you it's going to give you a lot more consistency, reliability, and most of all simplicity, so you can play golf without worrying about the minutiae. Check out this lesson if you want to not just create club face control, but get the speed without extra force. See you next time.